Before we begin, take a second and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy discovering hidden treasures, rare coins, and forgotten pieces of history that might be hiding in your own drawer or pocket, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. The story you're about to hear might change the way you look at the smallest coins forever. Imagine holding a coin so small and ordinary that most people would toss it aside without even a second glance. A coin that once bought almost nothing, passed through thousands of hands, jingled in pockets, slid across shop counters, and was often ignored or forgotten. For decades, it sat quietly in jars, old wallets, and dusty boxes. Many people believed it was practically worthless. But history has a strange habit of hiding incredible value inside the most ordinary objects. Today, we're talking about one of those coins, a tiny piece of metal from South Africa that many people overlooked for years. A coin that was part of everyday life in the mid-1960s, when the world itself was changing in dramatic ways. Cars were getting faster, cities were expanding, and nations were redefining themselves. In the middle of that era, this small coin entered circulation. It didn't look powerful. It didn't look special. Yet decades later, collectors began to realize that something about it made it stand out. Not everyone noticed at first. In fact, millions of these coins quietly disappeared over time. Some were lost. Some were melted. Some were simply thrown away. And the few that survived in exceptional conditions slowly began to attract attention from collectors who understood their historical importance. The coin we're talking about today is the South Africa half-cent from 1964. To understand why this coin matters, we need to go back in time for a moment. The early 1960s were a complex period for South Africa. The country had recently become a republic and had introduced its own decimal currency system only a few years earlier. That system replaced the older British-style currency that had been used for generations. For ordinary citizens, the change meant learning a completely new way to count money. Coins like the half-cent were created to make everyday transactions easier. They represented the smallest unit of value in the new decimal system. A single half-cent might have seemed insignificant, but at the time it played an important role in daily commerce. It allowed prices to be precise and helped businesses adjust smoothly to the new currency. Think about a busy marketplace in 1964. Vendors calling out prices, shoppers counting their coins, children running errands for their parents. In those small exchanges, the half-cent moved constantly from hand to hand. It was never meant to be collected or admired. It was meant to be used, and that is exactly why so few people bothered to preserve them. Most coins that become valuable today share a similar story. They were everyday objects first. People used them heavily, scratched them, dropped them, and forgot about them. Over time, the number of surviving coins in perfect condition became smaller and smaller. Now imagine a man in the mid-1960s finishing his day at work. He empties his pocket onto a table. Among the coins is a small half-cent from 1964. Maybe he tosses it into a jar with dozens of others. Maybe he spends it the next morning without even noticing the date. At that moment, he has no idea that decades later collectors will be searching for coins exactly like that one. History doesn't always announce which objects will become valuable. Sometimes it whispers. The design of the coin itself reflects the era in which it was produced. When you look closely at the half-cent, you're seeing more than metal. You're seeing the identity of a country during a specific moment in time. The images, the lettering, the shape of the coin, all represent the artistic and political decisions made by the mint during that period. Collectors love coins like this because they are small time capsules. Every scratch tells a story. Every mark hints at where the coin might have traveled. Maybe it once bought a newspaper. Maybe it paid for a piece of candy. Maybe it sat in a cash register in a small shop on a quiet street in Johannesburg or Cape Town. But here is where things start to get interesting. Not all 1964 half-cent coins are the same in the eyes of collectors. Condition matters enormously. A coin that circulated for years and shows heavy wear will always be common. But a coin that somehow avoided damage, a coin that remained sharp and clean, can suddenly become extremely desirable. Collectors use grading systems to measure the condition of coins. They examine every detail under magnification. They look at the edges, the shine, the sharpness of the design. Even the smallest differences can dramatically affect value, and sometimes, just sometimes, a coin appears that surprises everyone. Imagine opening an old coin collection that hasn't been touched in decades. The pages are yellowed. The plastic holders are dusty. But inside one of those holders sits a half-cent from 1964 that looks almost untouched by time. The details are crisp. The surface still reflects light. It looks almost as if it was minted yesterday. For a collector, discovering a coin like that can feel like uncovering buried treasure. Stories like this are not rare in the world of numismatics. In fact, many valuable coins have been discovered in the most unexpected places. Old cigar boxes, family inheritance collections, estate sales, sometimes even inside forgotten drawers. What makes the 1964 South African half-center particularly fascinating is how easily it can be overlooked. Because it was such a small denomination, people rarely treated it with care. It was the kind of coin that might fall between couch cushions or disappear under car seats. For decades, collectors focused on larger denominations. Gold coins, silver coins, and famous rare pieces received most of the attention. Meanwhile, humble coins like the half-cent quietly waited for their moment. That moment began when dedicated collectors started examining mint records and surviving examples more closely. They noticed something important. While millions had originally been minted, far fewer remained in pristine condition than anyone expected. And as demand from collectors grew, prices slowly began to rise. At first, the increases were small. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. But over time, something changed. Auction houses began listing high-grade examples. Bidders from around the world competed for the best pieces. The coin that once seemed almost worthless began attracting serious interest. For many collectors, the excitement isn't only about money. It's about the hunt. The possibility that a rare coin might still be hiding somewhere out there. Maybe in a box of mixed world coins. Maybe in a collection inherited from a relative who traveled decades ago. And that is what makes coins like the 1964 half-cent so intriguing. Because they remind us that history doesn't always come in grand monuments or famous artifacts. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a tiny coin that most people would ignore. Now imagine this scenario: a man in his late 50s sits at his kitchen table one evening. He enjoys collecting coins as a hobby. Not because he expects to become rich, but because he loves history. He pours a jar of old coins onto the table and begins sorting through them one by one. Copper coins in one pile, foreign coins in another. Suddenly, he notices something unusual. A small coin with a familiar design, but a date that catches his eye. 1964. He pauses. He turns the coin under the light, studying the details carefully. The edges look sharp. The surface still has a faint shine. Could it really be in such good condition after all these years? Curiosity leads him to research the coin further. He reads about its history, its rarity in higher grades, and the increasing demand among collectors. That moment of discovery is what keeps many collectors fascinated for decades, because every coin carries the possibility of a hidden story, and sometimes that story leads to something extraordinary. The 1964 South African half-center is a perfect example of how the smallest objects can hold unexpected significance. It represents a moment in the evolution of a nation's currency. It reflects the economic realities of the 1960s. And it reminds us that even the tiniest pieces of metal can become meaningful artifacts of history. But there is still one question that most people ask when they first hear about this coin. What could it actually be worth today? The answer depends on several factors. Condition, rarity in that condition, collector demand, and the history of previous sales all play a role. Some examples may only be worth a small amount. Others, especially those preserved in remarkable condition, can surprise even experienced collectors. And that brings us to the part of the story that many viewers wait for, the moment when the true potential value is revealed. But before we get there, take a moment to think about the coins you might already have at home. Old jars, boxes of foreign currency from past travels, collections passed down from parents or grandparents. Many people have coins they haven't examined in years. Hidden among them could be pieces with fascinating histories. Sometimes the most ordinary coin can turn out to be the one everyone is searching for. And when collectors finally encounter a well-preserved example of